there's an expression I'm sure you would have heard before that politics is show business for ugly people. And that's true in most of the world, but it wasn't really true in Australia. It wasn't really that showy, kind of high conflict, almost like it's days of our lives, but in Canberra, it kind of wasn't like that. And then it slowly has become more and more like that in the last, I'd say, sort of 20 years. We've seen it heading in that direction. Was there a particular issue, do you think, that got you interested in politics? Was there something that really kind of sucked you in? Or was it just a genuine, this was just a topic that interested you kind of across the board?
Look, I remember one of the issues that really kind of drew my focus in was, around US politics, but it also applied to Australia as well. And that was when 9/11 happened. I think it was 2000.
Of course.
And
2001.
2001, right? 2001, and I think I was in year 10 or year 11, something like this, right? So that really drew me in. And because, you're sitting there, you're watching this kind of historical event unfold in the West, and you hadn't seen something on that scale before. And then following that, you had this kind of, I had TV, and CNN was my go-to choice back then. And I would sit there in front of the television and just kind of watch that whole thing just unfold. I'm not saying specifically, obviously the dramatic incident with, the incident on 9/11. I'm saying the stuff that followed that. The way that governments got together and made a case for war, then went to war. Obviously, things that followed that as well, and I think that kind of focused me in a little bit on how these dynamics, especially in international politics, works, because you had this kind of coalitions and stuff being formed, and it was about ideals and values. Like that was the way it was sold to people. Like, this is why we're going to war, or this is why we're doing these things. It's an attack on all of us. And as a young man, still in high school, I felt like that kind of captured my attention at that point about what it means to be in the West, and what it means to be a part of this kind of global community of these Western nations that I'm a part of.
Well, I have to resonate with that because I'm slightly older than you, and I actually went and signed up and joined the Army Reserve not long after 9/11. I was already planning on doing it, but that was a catalyst to make me get off my butt and actually get it done. I signed up to be an infantry soldier only as a reservist. I knew I didn't want a career in the Army, and I spent nearly 3 years in the Army before I realized, and that's what actually started me on the path to becoming a libertarian. I was a conservative back then, but I resonate with that feeling. You're a young man, you're watching this attack, and you're listening to all of the talking heads telling you that this was an attack on you, and this was an attack on your freedom, and this was an attack on everything that you're supposed to hold dear. And it's, as a young man, you tend to kind of accept that and go, okay, that if that's what it is, then how should I react? And now, of course, I view things very differently to how I did back then.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Because when I look back now, like, I look at that part of my life as a lesson in how the media can actually manipulate people. I totally believe that I was actually, as an impressionable young man, I was manipulated by the likes of CNN into actually becoming very, very pro-war. To the sense that you lose all touch of any kind of feelings towards what's about to happen to the nations that are being in response. And I was all for it. I'm saying, like, when I look back now in hindsight, I see how manipulated I was by the media, especially when I look at the way that they went about the Iraq war and how they manipulated everyone into certain perceptions of what was happening in Iraq. When I'm back on that time, I feel like the media played a massive role in actually creating that narrative and manipulating people based on their patriotism, their love of country and loyalty and all this kind of stuff. So I look at that part of my life as it did give me that political focus, but it did actually also inform me that potentially the dangers of the media and how much power they have in terms of setting a narrative.
And the division, the concept of othering, turning a human being into something less than a human being, it's one of the most dangerous things. And I've only really woken up to this in the last 7 or 8 years. And I certainly wasn't awake to it back then. I was very much on board. You know, a mate of mine said to me at one point, like, you know, we were talking about going to war in Afghanistan and going to war in Iraq. Well, Iraq first, or was it Afghanistan first? Then we went into Iraq. I can't even remember anymore.
Afghanistan first. Yeah, Afghanistan first.
Yeah, and then Iraq, and then Iraq kind of finished and turned into a basket case, and now Afghanistan has turned into a basket case. But I was sitting there, and I was on board. I was a good little Johnny Howard fanboy. That was me as a younger man growing up, right? And he like, there was God, then there was Jesus, and then there was John Howard. Like that was kind of how it worked in my head, right? And if John Howard said something, well, he was above the Pope. Forget the Pope, Johnny Howard. And so he said we had to go into Iraq. He said we had to support the coalition in Afghanistan. Absolutely, I'm on board. I remember being in recruit course. I was it was in a narrow window of time when the reserves did the same recruit course as the regs. It was only happened for about 2 years. And that was when North Korea detonated a nuclear bomb. And for the first time, we knew for a fact that they had nuclear weapons. And I remember I was sitting there, we were eating, it was on the news. It was the only outside media we got to watch. It was a half hour of news during dinner, and sitting there looking around at the other recruits around me. And we were all excited at the idea that we were going to get sent into North Korea to kick Kim Jong-il, as it was at the time, kick his ass for having nuclear weapons. All right. And I was a part of that. I was a part of that mental kind of journey. But I did have one moment where I went, hang on, am I the bad guy here? And that was actually because of an American friend of mine who came over 30 years ago to live in Australia. And he's very American, though. He's one of those expats who becomes more American, or, you know, when someone leaves the country, they become more like their original country after they've left. You know, they're like, no, all these traditions. He was super American. And he was there. He was like, we should just drop nuclear bombs on the whole of Afghanistan, just kill absolutely everybody and start again. And it took something and he meant it, by the way. Like, that was literally where his heart was at. And it took something that extreme. And I heard that and I went, whoa. I'd been talking with him for a while up to that point in time, and we'd been agreeing. And then all of a sudden he said that, and I was like, hang on, there's millions of people there. And this guy is literally willing, like, the othering, the unpersoning, the dehumanizing of the Afghan people had been so strong in his mind and had taken such a hold that he literally, and he meant it, nuke them all, kill them all, and let's just repopulate that part of the world with some other group of people. That was the very beginning. I would say that was one of the very first things that ever happened to me that began to break me away from the good, staunch conservative kind of mindset, and began that journey that led towards being a libertarian for me.